Thanks for tuning in to the Medevac podcast, powered by the Robert Irvine Foundation, whose mission is to support and strengthen the physical and mental well-being of our nation's heroes and their families. I'm one of your hosts, David Reid.
And I'm your other host, Christian Meyers. Thank you very much for joining us today on the Medevac podcast. If you're new here, there's a price for the show. You have to share it with a friend or family member if you get something out of today's episode, and you're going to get something out of this episode today. Our guests today, we have a very, very interesting topic we're covering today. Organ donation is what we're talking about today. And our guests, we have John Taylor, who is a kidney donor and a former Army combat medic, as well as Colonel David Jones, who is a kidney recipient from another donor, part of the same foundation called Dove. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. We're really excited to have this conversation.
Thanks so much for coming on today. And what a better time, what the perfect time to come on Organ Donor Month.
Yeah, April.
April.
Definitely.
Which is kind of got to be kind of exciting for you guys. But let's kind of rewind it back before we kind of peel back the layers to this story and start with your military service. So being in the Army medic for 9 years.
Yeah. So I was an EMT and a paramedic for a long time. And then, I'll try to make a long story short. 9/11 happens.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And a good friend of mine, someone I had worked with for years, died on the plane that hit the Pentagon. And over the next couple weeks, I kept hearing my coworkers and I worked in state government at the time. I worked for Governor Rick Perry. And I kept hearing coworkers and other people in my life talk about what we're gonna do. You know, we're gonna fix this, or we're gonna go get them, or whatever. And it hit me fairly quickly that when they said we, they meant they, because they weren't actually going to do any of those things, right? They meant like we, like when you talk about your football team, but you ain't on the field.
The royal we.
Right, yeah. And then I realized that no, there's people who will be in harm's way, and there are people who will sacrifice for me and my family. And one, I wasn't good with that, and two, I wanted to take care of them. Mm-hmm. So I went to basic that fall, and I must have been a recruiter's dream come true, because I already had college degrees and all that stuff, and I walked into recruiter with all of my paperwork filled out, healthy, in shape, and said, "Hi, I would like this MOS at this school, and I want to go to Fort Benning and blah blah blah." And I remember the guy, Sergeant Anderson, he said, "Why?"
Right? You've got qualifications,
right? And so anyway, went straight in to Benning and then AIT. And since I was already a paramedic, I had the opportunity to go some additional schools that helped me get some really great assignments.
Sure.
And yeah, I joined actually as a reservist, but I ended up spending quite a few years deployed one place or another, and loving it. It was the best job I ever had in my life. I've absolutely loved it.
Pretty crazy story, having your friend being in the plane that hit the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that took a huge impact on your decision.
Yeah, it was Miss Olson was a coworker that we all knew in the office, and was kind of quite the figure, quite the she's a powerful woman. Certainly somebody we all respected, and was quite the shock, because we knew that day. She made kind of national news, calling back to her husband, and it brought it home very quickly. And also, sure. I had family that had recently lived in New York, and had just left, and so I was getting calls of, "Hey, is your sister-in-law there? Is this person there? Is that person there?" And I'm like, "I don't think so." Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of jumping on the phone, which you couldn't get a call out to anybody for anything.
Down.
And so it was quite a surprise.
Mm-hmm. And what were you doing at the time?
So that's a weird story, and one of the reasons why I love Governor Rick Perry so much. So I was actually late driving to work, and I rode this I had this great bike. I had a 1978 Kawasaki KZ1000 LTD. It was one of those cop bikes that's just stripped down to nothing. I bought it for $800 off the widow of the man that died on it. It was a great bike. And so I'm late to work. I'm riding in, and I can feel in my pocket my phone is just going crazy. And I'm almost there. I'm like almost at work. And so I pull over and I check my messages, and it's Rick Perry. And so I call him back, and he didn't say hi and how's things. He's, do you have family in New York? And I'm like, well, I don't think my sister's there, because he thought I did. He remembered, and he has a very good mind for people's families, and it's always priority for him. And so I told him, no, I don't think so. She's already graduated and stuff like that. But I'll get on the phone. And he said, how close are you to the office? And he didn't tell me any more than that. He said, get in here as fast as you can. And I literally walked in the door. I was almost there. Walked in the door and everybody's staring at the TV. Walked in the door as the second plane hit. And that was my, what is going on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was a little. It was those few minutes put me what felt like years behind everybody else in the room.
Sure.
And trying to catch up, and it was right then that everybody realized, oh, this isn't a mistake, right?
This is an act of war.
Yeah. And it was a weird day. So and that's really kind of what started my journey into the military. When I peel it back over the years of why did I join the Army? I mean, I took about an $80,000 pay cut to join the Army. And I had a family, had a wife and kids who had immediate hardships because of that. Right?
Yeah.
Had to move out of the house we just bought. It was a sacrifice of everybody I knew. For me to join the military, and nobody else I knew was in the military. Nobody I worked, except for Rick Perry. Nobody was a veteran. Nobody, it put me immediately as an other with everybody I worked with.
And what was his reaction when you told him?
This is a whole story in of itself. It really is. But I'll tell it to you. His reaction was, he looked at me and he said, I literally cried when I walked out of the room. I was a grown-ass man. I was 28 years old, 28 years old. And he looked at me and he said, I'm proud of you. And I actually asked his permission. I asked my wife's permission. I asked his permission. And he looked at me and he said, I'm proud of you. I'd never heard a man say that in my life. And it hit me hard.
Yeah.
And he fully supported me. Man, if it weren't for him, it would have been much harder, because as a reservist and as a guy with a few extra, little additional skill identifiers, I was deployed randomly and regularly,
Sure.
And then, I did Operation Trade Winds for you guys, for the Marines. And that was a thing where, you're gone for 28 days, and they're like, oh, by the way, we're going to bring you home for 4 days and put you on another 28 days, which, now you're telling work, hey, by the way, I told you I was going to be gone for 28 days. Now it's going to be a couple months, right? And he always protected me and made sure my job was there, and
It's fantastic.
Good to have someone looking out for you
And
like that.
you had a decade of experience before 9/11 even happened.
That's correct.
So can you walk through that and your reasoning behind joining as
Sure.
well? Especially not technically a peacetime, right? I'm sure kind of the Gulf inspired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, mine was kind of an interesting journey. So I was originally born in Kingston, Jamaica, and immigrated to the States when I was 10. And ever since I can remember, I don't know why, I've always wanted to be in the military. So even in Jamaica, I was always fascinated. So I decided I either wanted to be in the military or wanted to be a doctor.
Okay.
And when I came to the States, my family immigrated to Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia. And that dream never really went away. And so I decided on college, and I applied only two, which was the Air Force Academy and the Naval Academy. And I ended up getting into both, went to the prep school, Naval Academy prep school. And I had actually accepted the Air Force Academy and everything like that. But what changed me to the Navy is I went on a visit to the Naval Academy, and there was a Marine guard at the gate. And when I saw that individual in a uniform, he was sharp, he was professional. And I said, I didn't know who or what that was, but that's what I wanted to be. And so that was my introduction to the Marine Corps. And, so I guess I followed this innate dream that I've always had in joining. And so after completing college, I, joined the Marine Corps. And right at the time that we were graduating is when the Gulf War kicked off. And so everyone in school we were hoping they would let us graduate early or just get out or just, give us a break. We'd, go right over to the fight. Obviously, they weren't going to do that. But, so we ended up watching because that at the time was a CNN effect. That was really when CNN became global, going out and actually filming the action as it happened or shortly after it happened and now beaming those images back home. And, we were all, glued to the TV watching the reports, what was happening, which had never really happened before, in history. So it was very interesting times for that. And so that was my journey into the military. In 9/11, as John was talking, I was actually in Argentina and going to school. And a friend of mine called me and says, "Hey, get up and turn on the TV." And so I turned on the television, and the first plane had already hit. And I was like, what is going on? And I remember, as John was saying, everyone was, the reporters were like, we don't know if this is an accident, wow. And then shortly thereafter, they filmed the second plane coming in from nowhere. And I was just like, this is not an accident.
Yeah.
Immediately, I left my home and went into the embassy, the U.S. embassy there in the capital, Buenos Aires. And, that really kind of started what is actually going on? Because no one knew, as the intel was coming in and everything like that. So then I think for everyone, that's, everyone knows where they were in 9/11. That's when the world kind of changed and everything changed, not only, for America and the world, truthfully, at that point in time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as like a semi-senior leader at the time, like I'm sure, PL, what position were you when 9/11 happened?
So I was actually a student. Right. So I was sent there on a scholarship to be a student. So I'd finished. My first duty assignment was in North Carolina. It was in Jacksonville, North Carolina, at Camp Lejeune. Had a couple different assignments there. Had finished command, company command. Then went to language school in Monterey, and then was sent down to Argentina as part of the Olmsted Scholarship. Okay. And I was there studying when 9/11 happened.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. It's always, a lot of the guests we get on were inspired to join after 9/11, whether it was 2003, 4, 5, 6. So I always like to kind of dive into that inspiration, especially like joining the military when it was a non-wartime environment and kind of walking into that. It's difficult to do. So as an Army medic, what were some of the experiences you had, in combat? We always like to highlight the Medevac stories on this show.
So I had a lot of them.
Yeah.
I'm in it when I said it was the best job of my life. I got to, so I did 2 tours. The best work I did was 2 tours on a series of different embedded transition teams in Afghanistan. The first of which was in Zabul province, and that 270-day deployment was exceptional. I was the only medical provider, well, I might say the only qualified medical provider. There were like witch doctors and stuff like that. And I treated a lot of their patients for upwards of anywhere from 30 to 40,000 people. Wow. We did. I had a commander and an NCOIC. It was a 9-man team on a small combat outpost that was 30 meters by 70 meters total. I think it was from May to September, we averaged either a TIC, a direct contact, or an IED every other day. It was extremely busy. I saw hundreds of patients. urgent surgical medevacs for I think it was during that one like 119, 120 patients.
Wow.
It was incredibly busy.
What year was this?
This would have been 2008, 2009.
Okay. Yeah. Very busy time.
Yeah, especially Zabul province, southern Afghanistan. About 20% of my patients, traumatic injury patients, were children under the age of 12. I was the only medic on the team. I was the only medic around. Really, really busy work. I got to be directly involved in saving a lot of lives. And that was really enjoyable. It was super stressful. It's not true. I tell people this all the time. It was a very different kind of stress.
Yeah.
Like, I actually found that and I'm a data nerd. I'm a super data junkie. I actually found that my blood pressure went down in combat. My heart rate went down in combat. Like, all of my biomarkers for stress went way down in combat. And that's a whole different story because there was no 5-year plan there.
Yeah.
Right. It was running on a 24-hour cycle.
Yeah.
If you went to sleep at night, you're a hero, and if you don't go to sleep at night, you're dead, and you're a dead hero.
Yeah.
Like, there's a zero loss. Like, you win no matter what.
Yeah.
And it's kind of how I felt about it. I loved it. I loved the work. But the other thing I got to see, like I said, I joined the Army a little later. I think I was 34 during that deployment.
Okay.
So a little older, especially for an E6 on those teams. And what I saw repeatedly shocked me. I watched 18 and 19-year-old, and especially the second deployment where I was kind of parted out from one. I was on a URF, so I got parted out from one team to the next. I watched 18 and 19-year-old American men. And I worked all male units. Young American men with high school degrees or GEDs, who many of them, this was the first time they had left their state in their lives.
Yeah.
I watched them not only behave professionally, but behave with an incredible amount of compassion to the people they were around. I mean, I remember one time, I watched these guys hit our small convoy, three vehicle convoy, with a pretty catastrophic IED. Hurt a lot of guys, and I watched a young American corporal get out of that truck where his friends had just gotten blown up. We immediately found the trigger man in a support unit. And instead of just beating that guy to hell and executing, it was an older guy, which was pretty rare, but it was an older guy. I watched him give him water. I watched him make sure that he was in the shade. I watched him take care of that man when he didn't have to. And every, what you would expect instinct of just some young American kid would just be anger. He acted with professionalism and compassion. I got to watch the best of America in action over and over and over again. And I was in awe of it. I really was. And it made me feel very, very good about what I was doing. I mean, I joined the Army to take care of soldiers. And was a very, very fulfilling experience to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful. And you have, I just keep going back to 33 years because it's 13 years to retirement, buddy. We should retire. I always love this kind of question when you have such a broad range of service is what is your experience watching that military change over the course of your time in and the different leadership methods that are instilled into that.
Right.
This is very important, right? 2001, the initial invasion when we're hitting, spinning up in 2003, very different than 2013. So what are some of the kind of things that you saw in the beginning that you didn't maybe necessarily agree with that we're now transitioning to better skill sets implemented into that system?
Yeah, that's an absolutely great question. It's interesting as well because I think that when you're in the military, regardless of the branch for so long, when you get out, a lot of times you look back and say, oh, those guys weren't as hard as we were. Man, they weren't doing this, they weren't doing that. And you hear it all the time. And the one thing that I will say is The training will get better because you use science. You find out new equipment, new science. You know, you listen and get feedback of how to improve what you're doing. But the basic fundamentals and the value system is the same. So the Marine I trained today, or the soldier that's trained today, is the same as the soldier that was trained 10 years ago. The value systems that is instilled gets back to John's question of you're seeing the best of America. Regardless of the foundation of where that young man or woman joins the military, the value system that the military instills by breaking them down and then forming them into a team and a unit, you break all that individualism out of them, and you said, "Hey, you're now nothing. You know, you are broken down to your basic element, and now we're going to reform you into what we need you to be." And then seeing that individual rise to the occasion. You know, I can tell you that probably one of the proudest moments you see is in the Marine Corps at the end of boot camp or even at officer candidate school. Because in the Marine Corps, just like in the Army, and every Marine goes through, enlisted Marine goes through boot camp. And at the end of that, you have the crucible, which is a test that they have to pass to earn the right to be a Marine. And we emphasize that you earn the right. It's never given to you. And at the end of that training, they're tired, they're exhausted, they're dirty, sweat. I mean, you can imagine, they're barely standing up. And then they get handed an Eagle Globe and Anchor in their palm. And you'll see them cry and weep. And even for the officers at officer candidate school, because every Marine officer goes through that process to become, you know, the opportunity to be commissioned as an officer. And then everyone goes through the basic school in Quantico. But at the end of that, they get the same thing, you know. So my son is actually going to be commissioned a Marine officer this in May when he graduates college. And at officer candidate school in Quantico, when he went through, you know, and I asked him, I said, "Well, how was that when you went through the crucible?" And he said, "Dad, I cried. It was the proudest moment when we finished." And he said, everyone around me was the same. They were teary and cried because it's a culmination of your dream. And you earn that right, and you have that Eagle Globe and Anchor, because not everybody makes it. You know, and to have that. So kind of circular, to get back to your question, I think that the technology will change. The analysis of data, you know, as we become more data centric, you have more points to be able to improve, more data points you're pulling out of things to be able to make better decisions or more informed decisions. But at the end of the day, the value system that you instill is the same. The quality of the American that's stepping up, you know, is the same, and you get them to that point. You know, and I know that there's a lot of discussion now that there are not a lot of Americans that are in shape enough. That's one of the big things that we hear now. They're not in shape.
Like 20% or
20%, right? You have the sedentary lifestyle.
Wow, really?
Yeah, 20% of military aged, you know, young people,
People's persons.
people's persons are eligible. Only 20% or you know, a little bit less.
So you look at the physical aspects, you know, because now we live in a sedentary lifestyle. I remember before, nobody was you didn't have social media. You were running around outside and doing that.
And
but
that's the thing too, is people are living vicariously through watching other people's
Exactly.
lives.
That's a great point.
So kind of a question into that while you're kind of diving into that is there is a huge individualistic perspective in the modern day warfighter. And we were for years really good at snuffing that out, right? Why is that so rampant nowadays? Why are we seeing that change?
Or why has the Marine Corps done a good job of not allowing that either? I think the Marine Corps has
Marine Corps is probably one of the best.
They've been the exception, in my opinion, about not allowing the individualist mentality. They're like, no, if you want to be a Marine, you're going to play by our rules, whereas the other branches have kind of opened up to the individualist
Like red
mentality.
cards, and you know, everybody's stressed and everybody's worried about themselves. When I think that's the premise of basic training or boot camp or whatever you want to call it, is stripping that down and teaching them how to work in a group environment, selfless service.
That's a great point. You know, I think to get back to your point, Christian, the Marine Corps has been good at making its recruiting goals. You know, I think year after year. Some years it's tight, but we've always seemed to do that. I think, just speaking for the Marine Corps, the ethos is you have to earn the right to be a Marine. And so that's a much that's an ingrained point that if you want this, no one's going to give it to you. Nobody, if you don't make it, you don't make it. We're not running after you.
Yeah.
In that sense, and this is one of the jokes, and it's not anything against any other service, but like you might have the Army says, like be all you can be, or they talk about the different aspects of the benefits, like for example of joining different military service. The Marine Corps never advertises that.
Yeah.
We don't say you earn money for college. We don't say any of that stuff. The Marine Corps focuses on do you have what it takes to be one of us? That's it. It's a very basic and stripped down to the nuts and bolts. We're not here for anything else, but do you have what it takes to be one of us?
Yeah.
One of the most elite fighting forces as a whole in a service. Do you have what it takes? And that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Is there are many who rise to the occasion and don't make it. They may get injured doing basic training and they'll get recycled, meaning hey, if you get injured, you just get to the next platoon, because we want to give the opportunity to do it. But not everybody will do it. You had people that go in and says, I want to be a Marine. And then when the going gets tough, they're like, you know what? This is truly not for me.
Yeah.
And that's good. That's the idea of what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure this is not a cakewalk. And life in any military service is not going to be easy, especially when you're talking on the combat of the forward fighting force. Is never going to be easy. And we want those who want to be there. You don't have to be the strongest. You don't have to be the fastest. You just have to have the desire to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's what it takes.
That intestinal fortitude.
That intestinal fortitude is what it takes. And that, because when the going gets tough, that's when, as John was saying, your mind slows down and you focus on what's going on. So when there are bombs going off or where there's chaos, you have to be able to look through the chaos and perform.
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking for. That's what we're trying to instill. Does it happen every time? Are you going to freeze? Of course you are. It's human nature. But it's the will to be able to click through and then do what you have to do. And I think, all the services are looking for that ability. I think the Marine Corps, probably excels there.
So that kind of begs the question for me is there maybe a negative feedback loop or maybe a detriment, if you will, to the other branches that are kind of emphasizing the extracurriculars, if you will, right? The Marines has held to that values, those ethos for so long, and yet they're the ones that are performing really well in recruiting. But yet you have, we're kind of going off the main message, the main point for Army recruiting, like you said. So do you think that there's kind of a negative connotation to that?
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that. And I'm saying this in all seriousness, because in discussing this, I don't want to come off as like the other services don't matter, because that's not the case.
Yeah.
I mean, I love every other service, and they each have a role in what their mission is. And missions are different. Like you look at the Marine Corps, we're such a very tiny force compared to the active Army or the active or active Air Force or the Navy. We are tiny.
Yeah.
But what we try to do is even with our, as small as we are, we make the biggest impact whatever we do. And we imbue the leadership down to the lowest level. So that private that just graduated boot camp, we're giving them leadership responsibilities and to be able to follow as well. But we're saying, hey, private, go take care of that. And we're giving them that opportunity to lead from the very beginning, and we continue to do that. So whereas the Marine Corps, for example, I might take a corporal at NCO or Lance Corporal and say, hey, here's all the things you need to fix. Another service may use a higher rank to do that same thing. Well, we're not going to trust that. We're going to do Marine Corps. We don't have the personnel or the size to do that. We're saying everybody has to do it and be capable of pulling that weight. And so that young Marine has the authority at his rank to be able to do what he or she needs to do. And we continue to build that leadership all the way through. So, I'll tell a sergeant to go, hey, you need to go take care of this, where another service may say, well, that officer is going to be in charge. No, that sergeant's going to take care of it. So
makes sense.
Yeah, the Air Force is the opposite direction. We got lieutenants and captains to cover just about everything. So moving on throughout your career, David, what progressed you to get involved with Dove? Obviously, you You said a few years ago you ended up having a few medical issues, and you needed to move back from Germany. Can you talk about how that was prompted, how you found out, got your diagnosis and everything?
Sure, that's a great question. So, as a lieutenant, probably back in 1995 or 96, I was diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease. And there are many different types of kidney disease. And so polycystic kidney disease is literally, as it sounds, where cysts start growing on your kidneys and they basically take up all the good tissue in your kidneys. So your kidney function basically starts to decrease.
Okay.
I found out because I was urinating a lot of blood, and I was always active in triathlons, road races, different things. So that's not uncommon.
Sure.
You have a little blood in your, but mine ended up being really passing clots and everything like that as it goes through. Went to emergency room, kept me overnight, and then I was diagnosed with that. I was able to stay in the service. I was great health otherwise, and there's really no cure. You can't operate on it because you basically have Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
And therefore, I was able to continue my career, deploy, combat, everything like that without issue. So fast forward to, in every duty station I went to, wherever I was always followed by internal medicine or nephrology, just to make sure my levels were fine, test once or twice a year, just make sure everything is going well. Fast forward to 2022, I stationed in European Command in Stuttgart, Germany, and I was getting ready to retire. I had my retirement paperwork accepted. I was at 30 years or coming up on 30, everything accepted to go. And my doctor, went for examination, said, hey, you need a kidney now. It's not a matter of, later on in life, you need one now. Your kidneys are just about in failure. And so that was a very shocking for me now, because everything that I had thought about to do in life with my family, what we had planned, was now just gone out the window. It's like somebody scrubbed your whiteboard and all the things you had planned is gone.
Yeah.
Headquarters Marine Corps, when I called back to Headquarters Marine Corps and said, here's the issue, I don't know what to do. I have no idea what's going to happen. And I remember talking to my monitor. So they had a colonel's monitor. I guess the Navy calls them detailers. I don't know what the Army calls them or the Air Force, but basically your assignments monitor. And they said, don't worry, we've got you. And so they immediately put me on a medical board, which stopped the retirement process. And they worked and had a Secretary of Navy deferment. So the Secretary of Navy deferred my retirement indefinitely until this medical condition could be taken care of. I was immediately given PCS orders back to the National Capital Region to be at Walter Reid. And that's where I went. So I moved my whole family back, and it was kind of this unknown. For kidney disease, regardless of what it is, most Americans will wait at least 5 to 7 years for a kidney transplant.
Wow.
That's an average, but in most cases, it's much longer. And there are a lot of people who die waiting on a kidney transplant.
And this is after you become eligible to be on the list.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
And you're already at the point where you need a kidney immediately, so they put you on that list.
That's correct.
And that's what you have to look forward to is 7 years.
That's correct. So I wasn't on dialysis yet, but my kidney function was in about 10% and dropping.
Okay.
And so you're absolutely correct. So basically, when I checked in Walter Reid, you get put on, and they do all the screening, make sure you're eligible to receive a kidney, that everything is correct. Then, you're put on a national list. And so as Dove, I became aware of Dove after I had exhausted my family and friends. So as most military, you don't ever want to ask for anything. So I asked a few of my close family, kept it close. Hey, most people in my career never knew I had kidney disease.
Can you talk about
Sure.
that? I think that's a very interesting topic, is going to your family and saying, can I have a piece?
Yeah. So, I'll go from most military in general. We like to give. We like to support. That's what we do. That's our ethos. So to turn around and ask for anything was extremely difficult. But, asking family is a little easier. So my family was tested. My brother, they thought, hey, I'm O positive. My brother's O positive. It's a family member. So the acceptance for that kidney should be great. At the last minute, he had antibodies that would have caused immediate rejection in me. So he was no longer a candidate, but after the workups. So my wife and I sat down and tried to say, okay, what now? And she's like, we have to go bigger. We have to put it on Facebook. I was extremely reluctant. I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go out on Facebook. And she said, we don't have a choice. We have to do it. So she, as my rock, had to talk me off the ledge of not doing that. She said, we don't have a choice. And put it out on Facebook. And while doing that, a friend of ours reached out and said, hey, have you heard of Donor Outreach for Veterans, or DOVE? We said, no. We looked it up and we called Sharon Kreitzer, who's the director, the CEO of DOVE, and we had an intake call. Phenomenal discussion. And Sharon really educated us about kidney disease and the process of kidney transplants and what her organization does, which is an education piece. But really, she tries to find, her focus is on veterans and veterans who need kidneys, and to educate donors and find donors to support those veterans. So there are roughly 2,000 veterans that are registered. There are many more that probably have kidney disease that are registered with a VA hospital or with a program. But of what we know, there are about 2,000 registered. And those 2,000 will probably on a national kidney list as well, which is roughly about 100,000 a year that are on that national kidney list that are waiting. And so registered with DOVE, and then fast forward. So this was probably around July, I think July, August. So I'm at Walter Reid and everything, and then a sergeant, an Army sergeant, active duty, saw an ad in Military Times. It was a one-page ad in Military Times discussing transplants, kidney transplant, and DOVE, and he'd wanted to give. Before, he had a friend of his that had a kidney issue and wanted to give. He was really interested, saw the ad. He called Sharon, and she did an intake and then passed him on to Walter Reid, his information onto the transplant clinic at Walter Reid. And in a short story, we were a 100% perfect match.
Wow.
And there were two people that were matches, and he chose me because I had a family. And he said, I want him to be able to grow up and see his kids.
Beautiful.
And so it was a phenomenal story. We met the night before surgery. So my story is unique because I landed back in the United States in June, and in November I had my transplant. So you talk only a few months. And I go back to what I said before. Most people wait years. And so in my mindset, I was troubled because I was trying to figure out, how long is this process going to take? Is the military going to keep me on active duty while this is going on, if it lasts beyond 1, 2, 3 years? Just what's the process? How, just really trying to figure out what was going to happen. And long story short, I ended up getting a kidney in November of 2022. And at my retirement ceremony a few weeks ago, he was there. So my kidney donor came, I recognized him, and we've been close. We talk, fairly regularly, and he was there, at my retirement, and I thanked him for that I may not be at that point to set at the retirement if it was not for him, and to really have a new lease on life. So, kidney donation and what you can do living. Most people have it on their driver's license as donor. If I die, you can have whatever you want.
Yeah,
but you can really make a difference by being a living donor, because you can get to see and save someone's life right now. Not when you pass away, years down the road, but you have a chance to make a difference now. And so it was important. I'm here because of his generosity and his, and I'd like to encourage everyone else, hopefully that's listening, to consider being a living donor.
That's beautiful.
It is.
In my opinion, adversity breeds resiliency. How is your outlook on life as you're going through this process? It had to be, kind of a bittersweet learning moment, right? As you're kind of facing all these plans for the future are now gone. I have to remap my entire life, what's left of it, and then having that beacon of hope there, being provided by Sharon and DOVE and this wonderful organization. How did that change for you?
Yes, that's a great question. So the initial knowledge that, hey, you need a kidney now, and then what was going to happen was shocking. I mean, it was a gut punch if you can imagine that.
Sure.
Like, I knew I had kidney disease, but I was thinking, yeah, I'll be 80, 90, maybe I'll, just die of old age or something, but it has nothing to do with the kidney function.
Yeah.
And so that was a massive change. And it went through my mind, what about my family? What's going to happen? How am I going to continue to provide for them? All of these things. But I will tell you that I relied on my faith. I believe in God, and I just believe sometimes things happen for a reason. And so I kind of accepted that whatever's happening now is for a reason, and I'm just going to go with it and have faith in that, and go with it, that it's there for a reason, and there's a reason I'm going through this now, and just try to be as positive as possible and optimistic. I'm normally positive and optimistic by nature anyway, and so I just had to imbue that and focus on that going through. And I will tell you, now on the other side of that, I can see in my mind where God's hand had played in all of this to bring me to where I am. The people I've met, the things that have happened, there was a reason.
Sure.
And I'm just now looking forward to giving back to make sure that I can assist others, through this journey, and helping to also educate people about donations and the benefit of doing that. And if I can help through Sharon's organization to educate people, to tell them that they can make a difference now, then I think that's definitely worth it. But yeah, my faith is what really pulled me through.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
And huge shout out to Sharon, who happens to be sitting here watching the podcast. I was also a kidney donor. So beautiful stuff, and beautiful organization.
David, you mentioned that there's, you might not know this statistic off the top of your head, but you mentioned there's 100,000 people at any given time on the list. Do you know what percentage of those every year are able to receive a kidney?
No,
By chance?
unfortunately, I don't. John?
Do you know?
Well, no, the people who are on that list
Yeah.
are the people who have been cleared to get that kidney,
Yes.
that need a kidney.
So of that 100,000, how many people are receiving them every year on average? Do you
I have no any
I
idea.
don't
know
know.
about that? Curious. Well, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
So in 2023, I think there were about 6,200 living kidney donors,
Okay.
and I think it was 20,000 deceased donors.
Okay.
So that's a big
25%.
portion that is not getting a transplant, which
Yeah.
translates to the long wait. So the opportunity for growth and removing the weight really lies within kidney donation, growing kidney donation.
Sure.
Really emphasizing that people can live normal lives with one kidney. That's the growth, because there's only a set amount of deceased donor conditions that lend itself to organ donation anyway. There's a lot of misinformation about who could be a donor upon their death, but I think they're doing what they can to improve those rates, but it's always, living donation is within our control.
Sure. Absolutely.
Well, it's not just that, but living kidneys have a far better outcome
Yes,
on
they
the patient. So
3 times longer graft survival, so kidneys from living donors can last 3 times longer
Wow.
on average than kidneys from deceased donors.
yeah, it's a 300% improvement.
Wow.
So it's pretty
Okay.
massive.
That's a significant difference.
Yeah, and
only-
the kidneys from a deceased donor as well. Sometimes it takes a while to quote unquote wake up.
Yeah.
So somebody may have been on dialysis before they get a donor from a deceased person. They may still need to remain on dialysis at least for a little bit. Like
Okay.
when I was on an operating table after the surgery, my doctor, when I woke up, says, "Hey, I loved it. As soon as I connected your kidney, I started urinating." She's like, "Hey, kidney's functioning perfectly fine." It was ready to go immediately
That's
upon.
great.
And so my donor, they took the kidney out, so he went into surgery first, and then they wheeled me in. And as soon as it came out of him, they dropped it into me, and it started functioning, and it's been great. And I have 3 kidneys now, so they didn't take out the other 2.
Yeah, and I do want to dive into that
Sure.
with kind of as your experience as the donor, what that process looked like for you, how you heard of that mission, and why you selflessly gave that piece of yourself up.
Well, first of all, it was a little weird because I'm the first donor in the donor outreach for veterans process. So Sharon has developed a process that is lined out and quick, but back then it was extremely opaque.
Okay.
So I actually got contacted over social media for a guy that wanted a liver. And so I was like, okay, cool. And he's another veteran. I was like, all right, well, I don't know this guy, but let's go see. And it turns out I was not a match for him.
Okay.
But as soon as they told me that, like, I actually felt, still to this day, I feel a little bit ashamed. I hadn't thought of donating a kidney. I mean, I've been in emergency medical care for 30 years, right? And I never thought, crap, I'm walking around with a spare all the time.
Yeah.
You should be
It's not my
ashamed.
spare, it's somebody else's spare,
You
right? I should be,
ashamed, yeah.
right?
I donated both my kidneys.
But I never thought of it. I've been, in medical care my whole life and never thought of that. And as soon as I thought of that, I was like, let's just knock that out. And really, I had this in my head of, I can just go knock this out. I was fairly healthy. And so I went to I went to the only living kidney donation center, which, by the way, took me a while to find. Like, I thought I would just Google, nope.
Yeah.
Like, I eventually just called a random nephrologist and said, how do I do this? And he said, I don't know. Right?
He should know that.
But I'll get you in touch with somebody that does know. And so I
Yeah.
finally found a center that did that, because it's not a lot of places do.
And you didn't even have a person in mind for this.
No,
was just,
so I went there and I was like, hey, I'd like to donate a kidney. And they're like, cool. And I hadn't thought this far. Typical. And she said, cool, who'd you like to give it to? I'm like, well, whoever needs it. And then she said, well, would you, it was the nurse, the intake nurse. And she said, is there a subset of people you want to give it to? And she named off, I swear, every human demographic but veteran.
Yeah.
Like super specific organizations that do like all sorts of, and I was like, I'd really love to be able to give it to another veteran. And blank stares. She's like, no idea how to do that.
Interesting.
Right? I mean, and then so she was great. She says, I don't know how to do that, but we'll research it. And so then I went home, and I have a fairly fast medical network from, working for all these years. And I called doctor after doctor, called the commander for there at the Institute for Surgical Research there in San Antonio, and doctor after doctor, and everyone was like, yeah, I have no idea how to do that. Like, and it turns out, because there wasn't a way to do it.
Okay.
There wasn't a way for someone who wasn't in the VA system to be able to donate to somebody that was.
and I'm sure they don't like you going down a list and just saying,
Actually, they'll take, if you want to say, hey, this is the person I'm going to give it to, anything that gives somebody a kidney and gets somebody off the list to make space for the next person, they're cool with that.
Okay.
So I ran through that process for months, and then finally went back and I got a call and said, hey, we might have a way to do that. And the whole time, by the way, I'm still going through. So I start that in the beginning of 2020. Well, there's this thing going on called COVID-19 that made getting into any medical facility at all really challenging.
Oh, yeah.
And so we start this process of blood draws and EKGs and everything, because the non-directed or quote unquote altruistic donation process is different than the directed donation process. Like if you've got a kid or a brother or whatever, there seems to be one requirement for those people and a very different requirement for everybody else. For a non-directed donation, they want you to be super healthy. Like my cholesterol was normal, but they wanted it to be low normal, right? My blood pressure was normal. They wanted it to be low normal, right? And by the way, that changes. There is no like standard of what it should be. Every single center is different about who they will allow to donate, right? And by the way, the recipients are the same way. It's a completely opaque process. So finally I go in while I'm doing all these tests, and they say, well, there's this woman by the name of Sharon Kreitzer who started this thing called Donor Outreach for Veterans right before 9/11, and it stopped, right? Not 9/11, right before COVID-19,
Yes.
2019, sorry. And it kind of killed the process, right? But she's working hard to keep it going. We'd like to work, with her to get this going. I'm like, cool, drive on, right? And the whole process took me 11 months to be able to donate. I had 12 different blood draws, and like it was, I'll tell you, if you want to be a donor, and please be a donor, how'd you like to save a life right now?
Yeah.
Right. But if you're the donor, you have to drive that. Like
Yeah.
I had this idea that the second I say cool, right, I'll donate, that the process would just go and
Yeah.
they do everything they could.
They'll
Nope.
handhold you a little
At
bit.
literally every step of the way, doctors were willing to say, nah. Right? I mean, it's not their kidney that they need. Like, they don't
Yeah.
need a kidney. True. Right? But literally at every step of the way, like, I had to push and push and push. I tell the story to everybody. There was a couple times where I could not get into a lab because it wasn't required. Like, I wasn't sick.
It's elective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I couldn't get into a lab to do my labs. And so I called and I said, "Hey, who's the phlebotomist?" And so they were the company I was talking to says, "Well, this is the phlebotomist and this is their contact information." And I worked with the person who was taking my blood to meet me at like 5 a.m. in an HEB parking lot to draw my blood for my labs. That's right. And so we did that a few times, just like, and then there was a nighttime draw as well. And
That would be a weird scene if I was
it was a
driving by.
super weird scene. Super
weird.
Like,
Can you imagine
and-
a police officer coming by
Yeah.
like, okay.
Oh,
What are you guys doing?
He's like, I'm just gonna hop in the back.
Nothing.
I'm gonna take your kidney right here.
well, yeah, right? How hard can it be?
Surprised you didn't just do it yourself.
So I
Drop the
offered
blood
that
off.
several times, and they just wouldn't accept it. Right?
Yeah.
But
blood is this?
but we drove forward again and again, and then Sharon said, "Hey, do you want to know who it is?" I'm like, I don't care. Vet's getting it. And first of all, Sharon calls and says, actually, it's an email, I think. But anyway, says, "Hey, this is going to happen." I'm like,
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm like, cool. And by the way, we know the vet that really needs it. Awesome. Drive forward, right? And then she says, "Yeah, he's an Air Force veteran out of California." Which I was like, Air Force, and then California, but I'm still gonna do it, selfless. Yeah, but and it took me like 3 minutes on the internet, even though I said I didn't want to know or I didn't really care. It takes me 3 minutes on the internet to find out exactly who it is, right? Because he's in his Air Force. He was an Air Force firefighter, and in that community, he was very well known. Chief Benny had been a long time instructor. Really easy to find in all the associations and everything. And then I found out, this guy needs a kidney. So I'm like, so then it made me feel great. Because
What if it had worked the other way and you found out he was a shitbag?
Yeah, it wouldn't have been great. Because let me tell you, getting a kidney for me is not necessarily going to make that better. but it made me feel great. Like, this guy's an absolute hero, right? And then, as it often is, so when you're the donor, I want to be very clear. It's a process, and it's not a small surgery. Like, it's a significant abdominal surgery. And it's a weird one because it's one of the few things where you go into the hospital knowing you're going to come out worse than you went in.
Yeah.
Right? Feeling worse than you
Sure.
went in, right? But it's pretty cool because the recipient immediately feels better.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, 6 months from now, it's, no, they're immediately better, right? So that, however bad you feel, they feel that much better and more, right? And you're both going to end up feeling better later, right? It's pretty cool because there's a lot we do in life that are, 5 years from now, we see the outcome, or 3 years from now, we see the outcome, and that's cool. You see that outcome in somebody's life immediately, right? This piece of you immediately makes these folks that, anybody that raises their hands is my hero, right? And it makes these people immediately improves their quality of life.
Yeah.
And so he called me probably like a month later. And he calls me, and one of the things that he really enjoyed was he had a small orchard at his house in California, but he had been on regular dialysis that kept him away from that. That he dialysis was so much and so time consuming that he couldn't spend time with his family, couldn't spend time in his yard, right?
Yeah.
And so, he calls me, sitting next to his wife in his orchard. in his backyard, and what he loved doing, and was back with his family and back in his home. It felt amazing. It was really great.
That's rewarding.
Oh, it's super rewarding.
Yeah.
There's so many things, especially as medics. And are both of you guys medics, or were either one of you ever medics?
No.
No? Okay.
EMT
So,
basic, yeah.
so as a medic, we put people regularly. I've done this well over 100 times. We put people on vehicles or on aircraft, and we never see them again.
Yep. That's it.
Maybe they're better. Maybe they're not. Mm-hmm. I can't check my work.
Yeah.
I don't know where that guy went, especially if it's a local national.
That's the whole premise of why we started this show,
Yeah.
is to create that overarching story. And oftentimes, I was injured in Afghanistan, when picked up by Army dust-off, I never see those guys again.
Right.
Right. And, him being rescue has that side of it too. So we try to find that whole story and reconnect the dots so that people have that closure in the future. But you get that immediately with this.
Absolutely.
This kind of
right.
situation.
And it was I didn't realize how much I missed the satisfaction of that. Right. I didn't get that. I never saw that. Right. I almost never saw that, especially for a critically injured person.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's probably the first time in my career, well, it was the second time in my career that had ever occurred. And it felt pretty good.
So you're minus one kidney, so
Yeah.
you have one.
I have one.
And now you have three.
That's
so
correct.
tell
Doesn't
us
seem
how
fair,
that
does
works,
it?
because before this show, Christian and I were both curious about this because we thought it was a 1-for-1 swap,
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I actually, when I went into surgery, the day I'm sitting on the table, the doctor comes in and speaks to you, well, right before I get wheeled in, and we're just chatting, and they're just going over the surgery with me. Here's what's going to happen. You'll be, the process. I'm like, okay. And I said, and they said, yeah, we'll put in a kidney. I said, well, aren't you going to take out a kidney? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay. I guess I didn't know that. And so the basic premise is, if there's space within your body, so I'm in great shape, and they said if there's space within your body, they'll just insert the new kidney. Unless they absolutely have to, they will not take out the other kidney. And that's because it keeps you in surgery longer, which means it's can have the higher risk of complication. And it's a longer recovery. And the whole point of any surgery is to get you in, fix the problem, and then get you out so your recovery can be quicker. And so I had space to put it in. And so they said, yep, we'll just, insert the new kidney, connect it, and that's it. You'll have 3. My other 2 kidneys, because the new kidney will basically be the workhorse.
Yeah.
The other 2 kidneys, I'm sure will still provide to a little bit, but they'll start to shrink as the blood, blood flow goes down, and obviously as the polycystic kidney disease continues to grow. But they're basically going to be starved of blood as the new kidney just starts pumping and working.
Okay. Yeah, of course.
And so they'll eventually shrink.
Okay.
To what I don't know, but they'll shrink. They might still, provide a little bit of help, but really the main kidney is the one that's going to be providing that. And as John said, you only need one kidney to survive. Like my donor, we both went into surgery the same day. The next day, he walked in and kind of waved. He didn't actually come in the room, I think, because he was walking around, and then he was discharged the next morning. And
Very quick.
they kept him at Walter Reid. Well, they kept him in the area just to make sure they did a regular checkups, everything was fine. But within a couple weeks, he was back training. And in fact, he said he ran the fastest Army PFT that he did after surgery.
It was a little lighter.
Yeah, I was like, you got a kidney lighter. And so, I say that because there's a lot of misunderstanding of, well, I can't do without my kidney. No, you only need one.
Yeah.
And there's also some misunderstanding that, well, I'm active duty, I can't give because of my service. And no, that's not true either. If you and there's not only misunderstanding amongst the service members, regardless of your rank, who want to give, but there's probably misunderstanding of policy as well.
Sure.
DoD policy, you can donate. There's nothing to say you cannot donate. But I think there's some confusion. And in my case, the donor, when he went to his leadership and said, this is what I want, they were mistaken, like, oh, no, we don't want you to do that. We're getting ready to go on a deployment. And, we're given a lot of pushback. And, basically Walter Reid stepped in and said, look, that guy wants to give. He's going to save another Marine's life, and you're preventing that from happening. And, if you can either come two ways. Either you let this go, or we'll go straight up through the Pentagon and back down that way. And it'll be worse coming that way. And so they're like, yep, okay. And so he went back to his unit, after the donation. But, again, it's just that knowledge. It's that education, and just trying to get people
think
up.
that breaks up. It's working at 50% capacity, and you got a backup there, right? No, it's truly a backup. You only need one to function.
That's correct. And, so with one kidney, if you're a triathlete, you go back and do triathlons. If you're one kidney and you were in, you can go back and do combat. You can jump out of plane. Anything that you were doing before, you can continue to do. It does not matter. And so what you do is you give. And as John said, like for people especially that were in dialysis, I did not go on dialysis. I was close to it, but luckily I received my kidney before. But those on dialysis, you're getting dialysis 3 times a week. And when you're on dialysis, you don't urinate anymore. You stop urinating for as long as you're in dialysis because your blood is being cleaned and all that stuff is taken. But it takes a toll on the body.
Sure.
And it continues to, over time, just deteriorate your body as you go down. But immediately upon getting that new kidney, it is like a light switch. I've talked to people, it's like they don't have any energy, on dialysis. You're dragging, you're really trying to do all your daily functions, but you're just tired. All of a sudden you get a new kidney, it's like, boom. It's like somebody just put a nuclear power plant and you're like, I have energy, I have everything, to go through. So
And you felt that?
I felt the difference, but not in the same manner as somebody who's on dialysis, if that matters, if that makes a difference.
And you were close to dialysis.
I was close to dialysis, but I was still, I was still active, and I was still, walking and working out and, doing what I could. I had a restricted diet in the sense that I was just on a low salt diet, trying to make sure that I was doing everything that I needed. So I always ate healthy anyway, but, I was really focused on, taking the salt out, making sure I was drinking a lot of water, all the things that we normally do anyway, but just hyper focus and making that happen.
Can you talk a little bit about the success rate of this as well? I think for education purposes, I think it's important to let the audience know, like, now you have, it's not like you're getting an extra 3 to 5 years. You're able to function for the rest
of his life.
Yeah,
that's correct.
So I kind of wanted to touch on that a little bit too, and try to take some of the stigma out of what these donors, like potential donors, excuses could be, right?
Yeah, there aren't any. There just aren't. I mean, you really are walking around with despair. So one, you should get that most people. Here's the only excuse: you're not healthy enough to donate.
Sure. Okay.
Guess what? Go to a doctor; they'll let you know. You can't make that call.
Yeah.
You really can't. I don't want people to think. So I'm huge. Like if I had a motto, it's do what you can with what you've got, where you are right now. So if you're interested in being a donor, start the process right now.
Yeah.
Most people that want to donate can't. They're not healthy enough. Just like we were talking about, 20% of the people can join the Army, right?
Yeah.
But get into that process right now. You might be a candidate, you might not be, but get into the process. The recovery is different for different people. I've found, oddly enough, that men's recoveries seem to be a bit longer. And what's the percentage of women that are like 65% of donors are women, interestingly enough.
Well, more altruistic, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, that doesn't matter. Your race doesn't matter. Your blood type doesn't matter. Like, believe me, there's someone out there looking for that kidney right now.
Sure.
Right? There's someone, I guarantee you, there's someone and their spouse and their kids praying for the kidney every day right now. Right? So you'll go through the process. Some people's recovery takes longer. Still, I mean, I'll tell you this. So I help with some anti-poaching efforts in Western Africa and Southern Africa. I think I sent my picture to you. I think I might have been in the DRC. What was that? 3 months, maybe 4 months after my kidney donation, right? So I mean, like doing real work, hard work, and there's just no reason why you just can't get it started. Also, you actually don't. You don't need to be next to your donor. So the colonels recipient and the recipient and the donor were in the same place. I wasn't. They took out my kidney, they put it on Delta Air Freight, and they shipped it across the country.
Yeah.
That's literally what happens,
Yeah.
right? They wrap
Yeah.
it in a box, and they ship it across the
Yeah.
country. 24 hours, it's in somebody else, right? So geography doesn't matter. None of your demographics matters. There's someone who's desperate for it
Sure.
right now. Yeah.
And I was going to say I'd agree with it. And even if you do get tested and you're not a candidate for donation, there's so much that you can do as well by continuing to spread the word. The fact that you went for it and did it, you're a hero. And then you can continue to advocate for others to be donors. You can help by spreading the word about kidney donation. On Dove's site, you can look and see the stories of all the veterans that are waiting. You can post that on your own webpage and social media. You can advertise like, hey, do something. Wake up this morning and says, I'm going to make a difference.
We actually hear that story all the time, that I went in to be a donor. I wasn't a donor, but this person heard about it, right?
Education.
Exactly.
We
That's
hear
education.
it over, and then that person became the donor.
Yeah.
We hear that all the time.
And I think a really important note, to the audience is just educate yourself, right? Get yourself educated, find out, talk to people about it. And also, if you need help, social media has proved tried and true for getting you connected to organizations like Dove. So that's beautiful. Where can we find you guys?
So dovevets. Is it org?
Dove Transplant.
Dovetransplant.org.
Dove Transplant.
DOV, Donor Outreach for Veterans, transplant.org. And then the same in all the socials.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. And Sharon will, she's gotten pretty good at this. She'll find somebody that needs a kidney.
Yeah.
Just get
Case
in.
in point.
Yeah.
Case in point.
I'm a living example of it. And so Dove Transplants, DOVE transplants.org. You can look on the page, you can see everything that's going on, and you can call or email and somebody will reach back out to you and give you more information. Maybe you just want to find out, well, what's the process? What can I learn? There's somebody there to talk about it. It's a small nonprofit organization, but make a big impact and
saving lives.
Saving lives.
Saving lives. And tell you what, we're going to utilize this as a valuable resource moving forward to connect those dots and educate those that listen to the show, come on the show, and need help at the end of the day. Or even if we have those that are willing to be donors as well. So beautiful. Thanks for coming on and sharing your story. Absolutely inspirational and just hits it right on the head about that resiliency and continued service that both of you are doing.
Well, thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us on.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you both very much.
Thank you, sir.
If you are interested in learning more about Dove Transplants, you can head to dovetransplant.org. There will be a link in anywhere that you're listening to this. If you're interested in giving back, look into that. Maybe if you don't have a spare kidney, look into donating blood, bone marrow, plasma. There's lots of different avenues you can take. Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next week.
Until next time.
Bye.